Hey everybody, hope y'all doing well today, as am I. And today we're going to talk about do you really need a mixer in your home studio? And I'm going to probably ramble on a little bit about this, but I've got a lot of thoughts about this. And just to right off the bat, briefly, my answer to that would be yes, no, and it depends. And I've actually got a couple of mixers in my studio here. Let me just kind of show you here. I've got this one over here that I used to use. It used to be mounted right here in front of me, but I've just since moved it over to the side. And then I've got another one right here. And they're just small format mixers. And let me just kind of back up. Back in the day before, of course, home recording and with a computer and everything, you had a mixer console and you went into your ADAT or even your own reel-to-reel, Tascam reel-to-reel, or the professional studios had the larger format tape machines, the MCI, the Ampex, the Scully's, Studers, whatnot. And a lot of the mixers were basically required. If a band came in and you had a full drum set and the band went ahead and wanted to play everything at once, bass guitar, maybe some scratch vocals, some backup singers or whatever, and you really weren't doing overdubbing, you needed a lot of input channels. And so a mixer was a necessity. Now, yes, you could have had a whole bunch of outboard mic pre's, which seems to be pretty much more the fashion nowadays versus the mixing console, but a mixing console potentially really hasn't faded away, just for the reasons that I'm talking about. If you have a band come into your home studio and you need a lot of input channels, if you have a quality mixer, that can help you out there. If you want to mic up a set of drums, a little mixer that I've got that I was showing you there, a little 16 channel or something like that, might just fit the bill perfectly. And so if you've got a small mixer and you're not using it, but you anticipate recording more than one or two mics at a time, consider hanging on to that mixer because it'll be extremely valuable for those reasons. And but if you're like me, probably 99% of the time I'm using one channel. I'm using one mic, one mic pre, one compressor, etc., etc. In fact, I actually use the compression mostly in the DAW nowadays. So an outboard compressor isn't so much a requirement. I use a compressor to help maybe limit my signals going in, so I'm not clipping. But with a digital recording, that's not the case as it was with tape years ago. And so I think a mixer can be very useful. I think also now let's just go back 20 years, maybe even a little more. When you went into a mid-range size studio that might have had something like the very popular Mackie 24 by 8 or 32 by 8 boards, they were kind of something that a home studio could afford. They were a couple $1,000s, and you got 32 channels of basically pretty clean mic preamps. And so those were your preamps, and then and when you went into the larger studio that might have had a Harrison or an MCI board, or even going up the notch to say a Neve board or an API or a Solid State Logic, those preamps were pretty stellar. In fact, what I'm seeing nowadays is the external preamps that you can get now in 2019 emulate a lot of those preamps and those consoles. And so those consoles back then, 25 years ago, you didn't have a lot of outboard preamps because they were already high quality in your console. And then speaking like the Mackie mixers that I was talking about, and the Ramza mixers and such, those came pretty close to a degree. Now I'm going to say close in quotes here or parentheses or what do you want to say? Did a Mackie mic pre emulate a Neve mic pre? Well, not by a mile, but they were clean that you were able to get good quality recordings, and I think that's what was important. You were more concerned with just getting a clean signal and get that into your your recording device at the time. And a lot of times, like I say, those Mackie mixers were paired up with, maybe you might have had 3 ADATs there, so for 24 channels of digital recording on tape. No, that was not analog recording. That was digital recording. That's a whole nother topic, another issue or whatever. But getting back to, is the mixer really needed in your home studio? Well, I would say, again, yes, because if you're going to track more than just yourself, or if you don't have enough mic pre's, a small mixer that is of decent quality. Nowadays, when you buy some stuff, unless you're just buying stuff that's just poor stuff or just old vintage stuff, that was cheap back then. But you're going to suffer. But if you get a nice little Soundcraft mixer or whatever, a little tiny Midas mixer, those are going to be some great little mixer that I think will fit your bill for some external mic pre's. I'm ready for the comments down below. I'm not going to get into a debate. They're going to, what are you talking about, having a little Midas mixer, a little Soundcraft mixer? They're garbage too, but in effect, a lot of great recordings have been used, using those mixers as kind of as sub mixers to go into your DAW. If you didn't have 12 channels of API or Neve or 1073s or whatever, that's what you got to use. That's the whole deal. So if you're the kind of home studio where you're just recording one or two things at a time, stereo inputs, like a keyboard or guitars or something like that, and a vocal at the same time, then maybe you might just think about getting yourself some good mic pre's at this point and get something that emulates some of that really high-end stuff of yesteryear. Actually, something, nice API, the Neve 1073 seems to be all the rage, and people fall in love with, and get you a handful of those, and I think you'll be set to go. We'll get into whether you like to mix down on a mixer, or do you like to mix down in your DAW, and that's I'm going to leave that for another video, whether that's really what you need to do. There's some other things that you can do. I've got a fader port. Let me just flip back to my other camera here. You can't quite see it, it's a little bit out of but I've got a fader port here that pretty much controls all my software controls in my Studio One, PreSonus Studio One. So I don't need necessarily a physical mixer because I can do that on my fader port. So in effect, that's it's not a mixer. It's because there's no sound going through it, but as a controller, it controls everything in my software. So that kind of gives me a little bit of a hybrid feel. And so you might want to think along those kind of lines too. This is certainly not an exhaustive discussion of what I'm talking about as far as needing a mixer in the studio, but hopefully it gives you some ideas. And I think my head is flooding with ideas as I'm talking here. I had some main points that I wanted to cover, and I think I've covered that. So I'm going to probably go on to another discussion about mixers, about mixing down out of the box, so to speak, and specifically a little bit more in depth using a mixer, such as for headphone sends or monitor mixes, or just like I say, if you've got a bank of keyboards that you want to combine and have all ready to go, you might run them all into a little sub mixer and run them into a stereo input on your interface. Lots of uses for a mixer, and I'll get into those in another video. But for now, I'm just going to wrap it up, and hopefully it gave you some food for thought, and I'm totally open for comments. If you want to flame me for what I'm saying, go ahead. I'm up for that too, and I can just hop right on my soapbox and talk about that. But hopefully give you some ideas and clarify some questions that you might have, whether you need to go out and buy a mixer for your home studio. I would say initially no, but they can definitely be useful. That's it, guys. We'll see you in the next video. Stay tuned because there's going to be a lot more discussion about this. Talk to you later.